If there's one place we should expect high intellectual standards of discourse, it is here, the Australian conservative journal Quillette. An online publication that many consider to be a source of high-quality conservative writing, perhaps something like The Conversation, but for the right. Consider this interview with Dan Shiftan, advisor to Israel's National Security Council, to former Prime Ministers Yitzhak Rabin and Ariel Sharon, and a respected figure in Israel's security establishment, which says a lot about that establishment.
Palestinians don't have a constructive bone in their national body.
We don't criticize Quillette for interviewing Dr. Shiftan. That's journalism, and we accept that journalists should talk to all kinds of people. But nothing required Ms. Lehman to pick out this particular statement and headline it in the interview thumbnail, presumably thinking that this is the sort of insight that her audience would find most interesting. And also, let's be honest, perhaps because this is how Ms. Lehman herself and all of her staff also see Palestinians. We don't know the woman and are not making any assertions about anyone's character. But can you imagine a newspaper editor of her stature associating herself with conjectures about what is or isn't inside the bone of the, the Jewish national body, or the First Nations national body, or the Chinese national body?
This is the essence of Palestinian culture.
And the only people that say otherwise are spiritually Jewish or actually Jewish.
Palestinian culture is terrorism and then some.
The only people that their hearts are so hardened to the suffering of others that they could say there's a virtue in hating those people.
That's Palestinian culture. That's what they have.
To be clear, we don't endorse any of these statements, and also, to be equally clear, we aren't calling for either of these men to be canceled, however we define that term, because as a matter of principle, which we hope viewers of this series will have recognized by now, we don't believe in canceling people. However, once again, this does say something about us, that only one of these two men has actually been canceled, and it wasn't the man advocating ethnic cleansing. What's worse, the interviewer isn't some pro-Israel troll or cable news provocateur, but Harvard researcher Pamela Peresky, who is a collaborator with Steven Pinker, an intellectual hero of mine, and whose ideas about humanity and human nature are so at odds with the sentiment expressed in this interview and seemingly endorsed by Ms. Peresky that we honestly wonder how they got along.
They're also good in whining, okay? This is their favorite whine is, we've been wronged, we are victims. You know, they shoot you and then they say, oh, I'm a victim. I can decapitate children because I'm a victim. Okay. If anybody wants to buy it, he should study in Harvard.
Ms. Peresky, laughing at jokes like this, is presumably the kind of woman at Harvard who feels unsafe at Harvard, where a quarter of the faculty are Jewish, 4 of the 5 presidents were Jewish, and a very large number of students, including plenty of protesters, are Jewish. Finally, in what is perhaps the greatest and most breathtaking example of our deeply embedded racism, a racism that we don't recognize simply because it is so ever present throughout all segments of our society, from the very top of the social hierarchy to the very bottom, so totally internalized by so many of us that we don't even see it as racist. That is the story we tell ourselves, without evidence or even curiosity about Hamas human shields, what we call the mother of all blood libels.
The Hamas is in violation of international law, hiding behind children, hiding in schools, hiding in UN compounds, hiding in hospitals. They commit double war crimes by shooting at Israeli children from behind Palestinian children.
That's the former Secretary General of the World Jewish Congress, New York-born and Harvard-educated Dan Diker, saying something we've heard all our lives, yet for which none of us, and probably including Dan Diker himself, have ever actually seen any photographic or video evidence. What's more, there's a good chance that if you're watching this in the West, it may have never even occurred to you to even wonder about the evidence, or why no journalist has ever sought it. We call it the mother of all blood libels because, as we discussed in another video, just like the medieval blood libel that triggered the Kishinev pogrom, it involved the baseless but amygdala-hijacking claim about the murder of children. Claim which runs counter to common sense. After all, humans don't ordinarily murder children. We have highly evolved Homo sapien instincts that fight against that. But also, in the specific case of medieval blood libel, against the most basic tenets of Jewish culinary practices, which forbid, among other things, the use of blood protein to enrich flour. It's not kosher, something we Gentiles have always done, which is why the blood libel made sense to our medieval Christian ancestors. That's how we Gentiles get delicious foods like blutwurst, black pudding, and boudin noir, which you will never find if you've ever thought to ask at your local Jewish deli. So it was always absurd. But this, in our opinion, is worse than that. Because while medieval blood libel was a baseless claim about one group of Homo sapiens killing the children from another tribe, this is a claim about a group of Homo sapiens killing their own children. We don't know how anyone can have contempt for the illiterate, superstitious European peasants who believed anti-Semitic blood libel, on the one hand, while we, with all our access to information and knowledge and historical wisdom, accept claims about Hamas using the children of their own community as sacrificial instruments of war, at least without demanding to see evidence. Think about it for a moment. Have you ever met anyone who would do that to their own children? I'm not talking about a spasm of despair or defiance mediated by narcotic sedation like the Jonestown mass suicide or the mass suicides at Masada and many other examples in history. We're talking about an allegation of a 30-year sustained strategy of taking babies from the arms of their moms and sacrificing them in war. Really? We think that any organization can get away with doing that for 30 years? Forget Homo sapiens. Can you name any mammal that would do that? Ask your dog breeder. How long would it take you to create a breed of dogs in which females allow males to consume their own pups? Dogs. The dog breeder will probably look at you like you're crazy and tell you that there are certain things that even science can't overcome. And one of those is millions of years of evolved mammalian instinct. That's what any dog breeder would tell you about dogs. And someone tells us that people, human beings, do that and we just believe it? Without evidence? Without even asking for evidence? Open up your browser right now. Do an image search on Palestinian human shields or whatever equivalent phrase you want to see. What do you see? I know what you see. I know because I first did this search 24 years ago when Google image search was first unveiled, purely out of curiosity. Because even in 2001, the claim about Palestinians being used as human shields by their own people was a claim I'd heard all my life. I didn't find a photo then, and I've never found a photo since, even though I've been doing this search regularly. So I know what you'll see. But don't take my word for it, do it yourself. What you will see are plenty of links to stories about human shields and speeches about human shields, and maybe even graphic illustrations of human shields, but no photographic or video evidence of a Hamas militant with a baby strapped to their chest or standing behind women firing at soldiers, as so many people claim. Remember, Palestinians are probably the most surveilled people in the history of the world. They're being photographed everywhere, from fixed cameras, body cams on soldiers, from satellites, spy planes, probably in many cases their own hacked phones. Yet despite all that, you will not find a single photo in 50 years.
Yes, this incident has been shocking. The testimony of Mujahid is very difficult. The pain is ongoing now.
What you will see is dozens of images of Israeli soldiers using Palestinians as human shields, a practice that has been documented for decades, in this case with ample photographic evidence by sources inside Israel and around the world.
The point here is not to talk about Israel. The point is to talk about us. What is it that we are prepared to believe without evidence, and what does that say about our assumptions, about our priors, and about our racist beliefs about our fellow Australians?
There's so much attention on Israel. They don't want to commit war crimes. They really don't.
Do we know that,
sadly,
though, Deborah?
Do we know that? Well, I mean, I listened to the IDF spokesman.
Patricia Karvelas, a journalist whom we admire for her punchy and courageous style, but whom we have also criticized in this series, is one of the few journalists in Australia who does do pushback on questions like these. We covered the story of Deborah Conaway in a prior video, so we won't rehash it here. She and her husband Willie are both wonderful Melbourne artists. We don't want to see them or anybody get cancelled for things they say, especially since, at the end of the day, they're just folk singers. They aren't geopolitical analysts. Ms. Karvelas, by contrast, is one of the highest-ranking journalists in Australia. Curiosity is supposed to be a core competence of her profession. And on top of all that, she's Greek, so curiosity is supposed to be embedded in her cultural DNA. At least that's the story my mom always told me, and I'm sticking with it. Shouldn't Ms. Karvelas have more to say when Ms. Conaway says,
I said they seem to be happy that when the IDF responds, that if a few of their own civilians are killed, that makes terrific press.
But since the Palestinians want us to kill their children,
and I started to hear these talking points, and I was thinking, like, these are not even arguments. Have you ever looked into the international law about human shields?
Hamas have embedded themselves in such a way to use the Palestinians as human shields for their operation.
You have a group of people coming out of a civilian building with their hands up, and from their midst come a bunch of Hamas terrorists firing at you.
What so upset me was that I felt like I was constantly confronted with people who in so many parts of their lives were smart and thoughtful and empathetic and decent. And on this question, it was like a wall just came down.
There are a lot of young people dying, but I believe that the responsibility for that lies pretty squarely with Hamas, who have embedded themselves in the civilian population.
Do you really believe that international law suggests that because you think there are a couple of fighters there, you can take down a hospital or an apartment building?
In the hope that the IDF will fire back at the civilians.
they want the pictures of their children killed so that they can use public opinion against Israel.
Because if that's the way international law worked, what about all the apartment buildings in Tel Aviv where Israeli generals live?
This is how Jewish Americans are justifying, well, Hamas uses people as human shields. Like, they'll say things like that. Like, the way you can justify mass murder.
It's nonsense to say that you don't have to care about civilians because you think there are fighters there.
We can try to minimize it, but you cannot avoid it altogether.
These felt to me like defense mechanisms, like things people said so they didn't have to feel anything.
What the hell am I doing here?